The neon sign above Randall's diner flickered, buzzing like an exhausted worker on their last nerve. It had once been a proud little establishment, but now it was just another roadside stop, serving half-decent coffee and greasy burgers to truckers and locals who had nowhere else to go. The linoleum floors were scuffed. The air always carried a faint scent of burnt toast, and the jukebox in the corner hadn't worked in years. Behind the counter, Mia Carter wiped down a coffee-stained table for the third time, not because it needed cleaning, but because she was buying herself a moment to stretch her aching back. It had been a long shift, like every shift before it, and she still had hours to go. Her uniform, a faded blue apron over a white button-up, had seen better days. Her sneakers, worn from too many double shifts, barely cushioned her tired feet anymore. But the exhaustion wasn't just physical. It was the slow, grinding kind that settled deep into a person's bones, the kind that came from barely scraping by, from counting tips every night and praying it would cover rent, from knowing that no matter how hard she worked, life wasn't getting any easier. Still, Mia smiled through it. "Coffee's on the house if you promise not to fall asleep at the table," she teased a regular, old man Harris, who had been staring blankly into his empty cup for the last 15 minutes. He chuckled, his weathered face creasing. "Darlin', if I could sleep sitting up, I'd be happier than a cat in a sunbeam." Mia poured him another cup, even though she knew Mr. Randall wouldn't approve. He hated when she gave anything away for free, which was why, as if summoned by her act of generosity, Mr. Randall himself appeared from the back office, his beady eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Mr. Randall had run this diner for over 30 years, and in all that time he had never been accused of being kind. He was a businessman first, a boss second, and a human being somewhere much further down the list. The only thing he loved more than money was control, and he ran his diner with a strict set of rules. No wasting time, no free handouts, and no unnecessary conversations with customers. "Mia," he barked, his voice sharp like a knife slicing through the greasy air. "Are you charging for that coffee or are we running a charity?" Mia turned, holding back a sigh. "Harris has been coming here longer than I've been alive. I think we can spare." "Spare? That's my coffee you're handing out." Randall snapped, stepping closer. His balding head gleamed under the fluorescent lights and his lips curled into that all-too-familiar, disapproving scowl. Mia bit her tongue. Fighting back never got her anywhere. "It won't happen again," she said, forcing a neutral tone. Randall eyed her like he didn't believe her, but after a moment he just grumbled something under his breath and stomped away. Crisis averted. Now Mia exhaled, rubbing the back of her neck. This job barely paid enough to survive, and yet, she couldn't afford to lose it. She had already stretched last month's rent 2 weeks late, living off instant noodles and diner leftovers when Randall wasn't looking. If she lost this job, she wasn't sure where she'd go. She had dreamed of bigger things once. Art school, traveling, maybe even her own little cafe, one with warm lighting and homemade pies, where she could make people feel welcome instead of just rushing them in and out for tips. But dreams cost money, and right now she couldn't even afford new shoelaces. So, she stayed. She put up with Randall's rules, the rude customers, the exhaustion, the aching feet. She stayed because she had no other choice. The bell above the door jingled as the dinner rush slowed down. Mia stepped outside for a rare moment of fresh air, and that's when she saw it. A small, scrappy puppy. The golden retriever with matted fur and ribs that pressed too tightly against its thin coat was digging through the dumpster behind the diner. It couldn't have been more than a few months old. A tiny thing with oversized ears and sad, searching eyes. It pawed desperately at a discarded food container, trying to lick the last scraps of grease from the bottom. Mia's heart clenched. She knew what hunger felt like. She knew what it was like to search for just enough to get through the night. For a long moment, she just stood there watching. If Randall saw this, he'd chase the puppy off. If any of the customers saw it, they might complain. The right thing to do, the Randall-approved thing, would be to turn away, pretend she never saw it. But she couldn't. She just couldn't. Mia glanced over her shoulder. No one was watching. Moving carefully, she crouched down and whistled softly. The golden retriever froze, ears twitching, its tail tucked between its legs as if expecting her to yell or throw something. Mia's chest ached. "Hey there, little guy," she whispered. "I won't hurt you." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a leftover dinner roll from an uneaten meal. She had planned to take it home for herself later, but the dog needed it more. She held it out, waiting. The puppy hesitated, sniffing the air. Then cautiously it crept forward and snatched the roll from her hand. Mia smiled, watching as it devoured the food in frantic bites. For a moment, everything else faded. The exhaustion, the stress, the overwhelming weight of her reality. Right. Now all that mattered was that for the first time in who knows how long, this little dog wasn't hungry. She reached out slowly, letting the puppy sniff her fingers. Then, to her surprise, it wagged its tail, just a little. Mia laughed softly. "You're a fighter, huh?" The puppy looked up at her, licking the last crumbs from its lips. Mia didn't know it yet, but this tiny act of kindness was about to change everything. Forever. The puppy finished the last crumbs of the dinner roll, licking its lips and looking up at Mia with wide, cautious eyes. Its tiny ribs were still too visible beneath its scruffy fur, and Mia's heart clenched. One roll wasn't enough. She glanced toward the diner's back door, then toward the puppy again. If Randall caught her, she'd be in trouble. But could she really just walk away? The wind picked up slightly, rustling the few damp cardboard boxes stacked near the dumpster. The puppy flinched but didn't run, as if it had learned that no matter where it went, trouble followed. Mia exhaled, her decision already made. Moving quickly, she slipped back inside the diner, heart pounding. The dinner rush had died down, leaving only a few lingering customers at the booths. Randall was in his office, probably counting the day's earnings like they were gold bars in a vault. Good. Mia walked past the counter and grabbed a leftover plate from a table someone had just vacated. Half a grilled cheese sandwich and a few fries. Not much, but better than nothing. She glanced at the kitchen window and spotted Benny, the cook, stacking plates. Benny was one of the only decent people here. He was in his 50s, with a gruff voice, but a soft heart. She had once seen him slip a free slice of pie to a kid who looked like he hadn't eaten in days. If anyone wouldn't rat her out, it was Benny. She edged closer to the counter. "Hey, Benny," she whispered. He turned, eyebrow raised. "What's up?" Mia hesitated, then leaned in. "Got anything extra back there? Something bound for the trash?" Benny narrowed his eyes. "You didn't eat today, did you?" Mia forced a smile. "It's not for me." Benny looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You're too soft, Carter." He reached under the counter, pulled out a small paper bag, and slid it to her. "Bread and some bacon that's a little overcooked. Randall would toss it anyway." She grinned. "You're a lifesaver. Don't get caught." She grabbed the bag, tucked it under her apron, and hurried toward the back door. Her pulse quickened as she stepped outside, glancing over her shoulder before kneeling beside the puppy. "Look what I got for you, little guy." The puppy's nose twitched at the smell of bacon, and its tail gave a hesitant wag. Mia pulled out a piece of bread, broke off some of the bacon, and held it out. This time, the pup didn't hesitate. It gobbled down the food with desperate speed, licking her fingers when it was done. Mia chuckled softly, stroking its tiny head. "You're gonna be okay," she murmured. She didn't realize she wasn't alone. A sharp voice sliced through the quiet alleyway. Well, what do we have here?" Mia froze. Slowly, she turned, and there stood Randall. His arms were crossed, his face a mask of disgust and fury. The back door stood open behind him, swinging slightly in the wind. She had been so careful. Randall strode forward, his shoes crunching against the gravel. He glanced at the puppy, still licking its lips, and then back at the bag in Mia's hands, his face twisted in anger. "Tell me, Carter, are we a dog shelter now?" Mia swallowed hard. He snatched the paper bag from her hands. The remaining food tumbled onto the ground and the puppy flinched, cowering. Mia immediately reached for the poor thing, scooping it up instinctively. It trembled against her chest. Randall's lip curled. "Are you stealing from me now?" Mia's stomach dropped. "No, it was just scraps. Things we were going to throw away anyway." Randall scoffed. "Scraps I paid for. You think I run this place so you can hand out freebies?" Mia's heart pounded. "It's just a puppy, Randall. It was starving. I don't give a damn if it's the Queen of England's dog." His voice sharpened. "You want to feed strays? Do it on your own dime." She tightened her arms around the puppy, feeling its tiny heartbeat thudding wildly. Randall stared at her for a long moment. Then his expression hardened. "You're fired." For a second, Mia wasn't sure she heard him right. "What?" "You heard me." Randall gestured toward the alley. "Take your little charity case and get the hell out. You want to play Mother Teresa? Do it somewhere else." Mia's throat tightened. No, she couldn't lose this job. Not now. "Randall, please," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "This job is all I have. You don't have to do this." "Oh, but I do," he sneered. "I don't keep employees who steal from me." She gritted her teeth. It was food we were going to throw away. Randall's eyes glinted. He was enjoying this. "This is a business, Carter. And I don't have room for bleeding hearts who think the rules don't apply to them." Mia's chest ached. The puppy shivered in her arms. She had spent years swallowing. Her pride, working herself to exhaustion, trying to keep this miserable job just to stay afloat. And now, because of one tiny act of kindness, it was gone. She could have begged. She could have apologized. But what would be the point? Randall wasn't the kind of man who changed his mind. She drew in a shaky breath, lifted her chin, and met his gaze. "Fine." Randall's smirk faltered slightly, as if he'd expected her to grovel. Mia turned on her heel and walked away. The diner door slammed shut behind her. Mia's legs felt unsteady as she stepped out onto the empty street. The cold air bit at her skin, but she barely noticed. Her mind raced. What now? She had no job, no savings, no backup plan. Rent was due in a week, and she didn't have enough to cover it. Even if she found another job tomorrow, she wouldn't get paid in time. Tears burned at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The puppy whimpered, pressing its tiny nose into her shoulder. Mia looked down at the fragile little thing, barely more than skin and bones. "Well," she whispered hoarsely, "I guess we're both out of luck, huh?" The puppy licked her chin. Mia let out a shaky laugh despite everything. She had lost everything tonight. Everything. Except this tiny creature in her arms, and she wasn't about to give up on it. She took a deep breath and kept walking, because no matter how bad things got, she would always choose kindness. Mia Carter had never felt this lost before. The cold night air wrapped around her like a cruel embrace, stinging her skin as she sat on the curb just outside Randall's diner. The glow from inside still flickered against the pavement, but to her it might as well have been a different world, one she no longer belonged to. Fired. The word echoed in her head over and over again, gnawing at her like hunger. Her entire life had been a delicate balancing act. One unexpected expense, away from disaster. And now? She was free-falling. The puppy whimpered softly in her lap, shifting its tiny body against her stomach. Mia adjusted her grip, cradling it carefully. The little thing barely weighed anything, its ribs still too sharp beneath its scruffy fur. It should have been running through a backyard somewhere, playing fetch, not scavenging for scraps in an alley. Just like she shouldn't have to beg for jobs that treated her like nothing. She squeezed her eyes shut, tilting her head back against the cold brick wall of the diner. What now? She had nowhere to go. Her tiny apartment, the one with the leaky ceiling and flickering lights, was barely hers anymore. Rent was overdue, and her landlord wasn't the patient type. She'd hoped to scrape together enough from this week's tips to buy herself more time, but Randall had snatched that away from her. Her bank account had maybe $20 in it, enough for a cheap meal, maybe a night at the cheapest motel if she stretched it. And then, she didn't know. A car drove past, its headlights illuminating her misery for a brief moment before disappearing down the empty road. The town had gone quiet. Most people tucked into their warm homes, completely unaware of the girl sitting outside in the dark, clutching a stray puppy like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. She let out a breath, watching it curl into the night air. There had to be a way out of this, right? As the wind whistled through the empty streets, a memory surfaced. She was 8 years old, walking home from school with her mother. It had been one of those golden autumn afternoons when the sun kissed the trees and made everything look like a painting. Mia had been skipping alongside her mom, her small hand swinging in the safety of a larger one. Then they saw him, a homeless man, sitting on the sidewalk, wrapped in an old blanket that barely looked warm enough. His eyes had been tired, sunken, hopeless. Mia had slowed down, staring. Her mother had stopped too, rummaging through her purse. Mia remembered watching as her mother pulled out a sandwich from the brown paper bag she had packed for herself. Without hesitation, she walked up to the man and offered it to him. He hesitated at first, blinking in surprise, but then with a soft thank you, he took it. Mia had tugged on her mother's sleeve as they walked away. "But Mama, what about your lunch?" Her mother had smiled down at her. "I'll be fine, baby. He needed it more." Mia had frowned. "But why? We don't even know him." Her mother had knelt down, brushing Mia's bangs out of her eyes. "Kindness always comes back, sweetheart. Sometimes in ways we don't expect." Mia had nodded, even if she didn't fully understand. Now sitting on the cold pavement, she thought she finally did. The puppy stirred in her lap, its tiny body shifting to press closer. Its small warm breath tickled her wrist, and for the first time that night, Mia smiled. She ran her fingers gently through its scruffy fur. "Looks like it's just us now, huh?" The puppy lifted its head, staring at her with round, trusting eyes. It let out a soft sigh and nuzzled into her chest. Mia exhaled. She was homeless, jobless, and broke. But somehow, holding this tiny creature made her feel a little less alone. She could have ignored it back there. Could have walked past the, dumpster, pretended not to see. Could have chosen to be like Randall, cold, heartless, unwilling to spare something as small as a meal. But she wasn't, and she never would be. She stared down at the puppy, her fingers tracing over the soft fur of its ears. "What should I call you?" she murmured. The puppy didn't answer, of course, but it tilted its head as if it was thinking. Mia chuckled softly. "What about Lucky?" The name felt right. Because despite everything, despite the fact that she had lost her job, her security, and maybe even her home, she still had this moment, and maybe, just maybe, things would turn around. She just had to hold on to hope. Mia leaned back against the wall again, the weight of exhaustion pressing into her. The streetlights flickered above, the night stretching on, long and uncertain. But she wasn't alone. Not anymore. And that was enough to keep her going. For now. The night stretched on, cold and quiet. Mia sat on the curb, arms wrapped around Lucky, whose small body was curled tightly against her. The little dog's breathing had slowed, its exhaustion finally overtaking its hunger and fear. For the first time all day, it felt safe. Mia wished she could say the same for herself. She sighed, rubbing at her tired eyes. What now? She could go home, at least for as long as her landlord let her stay before kicking her out. But then what? She didn't have another job lined up, no savings, no plan. The thought made her stomach clench. She was so lost in her thoughts that she almost didn't hear the car approaching. The deep rumble of an expensive engine cut through the quiet street, its low growl standing out in this part of town. Mia lifted her head just as a sleek black car rolled to a stop in front of the diner. Not just any car. This wasn't some beat-up truck or the kind of sedan the locals drove. This was money. A luxury vehicle that didn't belong anywhere near a place like Randall's Diner. Even from where she sat, Mia could see its polished, gleaming exterior reflecting the neon lights from the diner sign. The tinted windows revealed nothing of who was inside. For a moment, everything was still. Then the back door swung open. A man stepped onto the pavement. tall, immaculately dressed. Even in the dim glow of the streetlights, Mia could tell his suit wasn't just expensive, it was tailored, designed to fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His dark dress shoes barely made a sound as he moved, and when he adjusted his cuffs, the silver watch on his wrist caught the light. He looked important, like he belonged in a boardroom, not in front of some rundown diner in a nowhere town. Mia straightened slightly, her exhaustion momentarily replaced by curiosity. Who the hell was this guy? The stranger took a moment to scan his surroundings, his sharp eyes moving over the diner, the street, the dimly lit parking lot. Then, without hesitation, he strode toward the front entrance. Mia watched as the door swung shut behind him. She had no idea why, but something about this didn't feel random. Something was about to happen. The diner was winding down for the night. With only a handful of customers left, truckers nursing their coffee, a couple finishing their late-night meal, and a tired waitress wiping down the counter, Randall stood behind the register, counting the day's earnings. He was still fuming. His mood had soured ever since Mia walked out with that stupid dog, and he had already decided that tonight had been a loss. Then the door swung open, and the air in the diner shifted. The man in the suit stepped inside. Instantly, people turned to look. He didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. Randall glanced up, eyebrows furrowing. Out-of-towners were rare this late at night, and ones that looked like this, even rarer. The man stepped forward with purpose, his polished shoes silent against the diner's scuffed floor. For a moment, he simply surveyed the place. Then he spoke. "I'm looking for the waitress who fed the puppy." Silence. Every head in the diner turned. Even the waitress behind the counter froze mid-wipe. Randall's frown deepened. "Excuse me?" The man's gaze settled on him, unwavering. "The girl who was outside earlier. She fed a stray dog. I want to speak with her." Randall stiffened. His first instinct was to send this guy packing. He hated strangers coming in and acting like they owned the place. But something about this man's tone, his presence, made him hesitate. This wasn't someone you brushed off. Still, Randall crossed his arms. "You mean Mia? She doesn't work here anymore." The man's expression didn't change. "Why not?" Randall scoffed. "Because she was stealing. Took food from my kitchen and handed it off to some filthy stray like this was a charity." The room was so quiet you could hear a fork clink against a plate in the back booth. The man's eyes darkened. For a moment, Randall thought he saw something, a flicker of anger, of disappointment. But just as quickly, the expression was gone, replaced with something cool and unreadable. Then, in a calm, measured voice, the man asked, "Where is she now?" By now, everyone in the diner was watching. Even the truckers, usually too tired to care about anything, were leaning forward slightly, trying to make sense of the situation. The well-dressed man didn't look like someone who should be asking about a fired waitress. He looked like someone who had an empire to run. Randall didn't like the attention. He grumbled, "She's probably still outside, but I don't see why it's your problem." The man didn't answer. He simply turned, walking toward the door, without another word. And just like that, the air in the diner felt normal again. But something had changed. People exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. Who was he? Why did he care about some random girl who got fired? Randall, still standing behind the counter, felt something uneasy settle in his chest. Something told him he had just made a mistake. A big one. Mia was still on the curb when the door to the diner swung open. She barely had time to react before a pair of polished dress shoes stopped in front of her. Slowly, she looked up. And there he was, the stranger in the suit. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Mia, exhausted and confused, blinked up at him, unsure of whether she should be worried or intrigued. The man studied her for a second, his expression unreadable. Then his gaze dropped to the tiny bundle in her lap. Lucky stirred, yawning, and nestled closer to her. When the man looked back at Mia, something softened in his face. "You fed him?" he asked, his voice lower, almost thoughtful. Mia hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, a pause. Then to her absolute shock, the man's lips curved into the faintest smile. That was kind of you. Mia frowned. Who are you? The man extended a hand. Ethan Lawson. His name sent a jolt through her. Ethan Lawson. Even if she had never met him before, she had heard of him. The CEO of Lawson Hospitality Group, owner of some of the biggest restaurant chains in the state. A man so far removed from her world that she couldn't begin to understand why he was standing in front of her now. Mia stared at him, completely stunned. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "Come with me," he said. Mia swallowed, heart pounding. She had no idea what was about to happen, but somehow she knew. Her life was about to change. Mia stared up at Ethan Lawson, his name still ringing in her ears. She knew who he was. Everyone in the restaurant industry did. Ethan wasn't just successful, he was a giant in the business. The CEO of Lawson Hospitality Group, a man responsible for building one of the biggest high-end restaurant chains in the country. So what the hell was he doing here? And why was he asking for her? She was still processing when Lucky stirred in her arms, letting out a small, content sigh. Ethan's gaze dropped to the puppy, and something in his sharp expression softened. He took a step closer, kneeling slightly to meet her at eye level. "Where did you find him?" His voice was lower now, almost careful. Mia hesitated. "He was outside the diner, digging through the trash." A beat of silence. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. His composed demeanor wavered for the first time, his jaw clenching briefly before he nodded. "He's mine," he said. "His name is Lucky." Mia blinked. "Wait, what?" Ethan's gaze was still on the small bundle in her lap. "Lucky? He went missing about a week ago," Ethan explained. "I've been looking for him ever since." Mia's mouth parted slightly as she processed this. A dog like this, thin, sickly, abandoned, belonged to him? To a billionaire who could probably afford to feed it gourmet meals? Ethan must have noticed her doubt because he sighed, shaking his head. "He wasn't always like this," he said quietly. "I rescued him as a puppy. He grew up in my home. Always well-fed, always cared for." Mia glanced down at Lucky, the pup's tiny chest rising and falling steadily against her arm. She had never imagined him as anything but a stray, but now she was seeing him differently. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan's expression darkened. 30. "I was out of town for business. My house staff was supposed to look after him. Then one night he slipped out. No one saw him go. By the time I got back, he was already missing." Mia swallowed. "So you've been looking for him this whole time?" Ethan nodded. "Every day." A strange ache settled in Mia's chest. For the past week, Lucky had been alone, hungry, desperate. But he had been missed. He hadn't been thrown away. She ran a hand over Lucky's fur, her fingers ghosting over his fragile frame. He had a home, and yet the second he had been out on the streets, he had ended up just like her. Lost, forgotten, discarded by the world. Inside Randall's diner, people were still buzzing over Ethan Lawson's unexpected arrival. At the counter, Cassie, one of the waitresses who had worked alongside Mia for years, leaned in close to the busboy. "I heard everything," she whispered, eyes wide. The kid blinked. "About the dog?" "No, about Mia," Cassie said. "Randall fired her for feeding that dog." The busboy's eyes widened. "No way." Cassie nodded furiously. "I saw the whole thing. She gave the pup a few scraps and Randall blew up. Called it stealing." She made air quotes around the word, rolling her eyes. "Tossed her out like she was nothing." The busboy whistled under his breath. "That's messed up." Cassie glanced toward the front window. Ethan was still outside with Mia, talking, his sharp suit a stark contrast to her wrinkled apron and worn-out sneakers. Cassie chewed her lip. "You think he came for her?" The busboy frowned. "What do you mean?" Cassie shrugged. "I mean, why else would someone like him show up here asking about her?" She wasn't the only one wondering. The rest of the diner had quieted, heads turned toward the windows. watching as Mia Carter, formerly just another struggling waitress, sat in front of one of the most powerful men in the restaurant industry. And Randall? Randall stood behind the counter, gripping the register so hard his knuckles turned white. He could feel it in his bones. Something was about to go very, very wrong for him. Back outside, Mia shifted uncomfortably. She still didn't know why Ethan was here. Why he had come looking for her. Maybe he just wanted Lucky back. Maybe he was just grateful. And maybe once she handed the puppy over, she'd still be jobless, hopeless, and lost. Ethan seemed to sense her hesitation. "You saved him," he said suddenly. Mia blinked. "What?" "You fed him. Took care of him." His voice was steady, firm. "If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't helped him." He trailed off, shaking his head slightly. Mia swallowed. She hadn't done much, just given Lucky a few scraps. But to him, to this powerful, important man standing in front of her, it had meant everything. Ethan's jaw tightened. "And you got fired for it?" Mia flinched slightly. She wasn't embarrassed, just exposed. It was one thing to be humiliated in front of Randall. But this was different. Ethan's eyes darkened. "Tell me what happened." His voice was sharp now, demanding. Mia hesitated. Then, with a quiet sigh, she told him everything. How she had found Lucky starving. How Randall had caught her sneaking food to him. How she had begged for her job, only to be thrown out without a second chance. When she finished, Ethan was silent. A heavy silence. The kind that was dangerous. His hands curled into fists at his sides. Mia expected pity, maybe even discomfort, but instead, he looked furious. His entire posture shifted, shoulders squaring, jaw clenched like he was barely holding himself back from marching into the diner and tearing Randall apart. Mia blinked up at him, startled. Ethan let out a slow breath, trying to steady himself. "He fired you," he said finally, voice low and measured. "For showing compassion." Mia exhaled, running a tired hand over her face. "Yeah." Ethan's eyes flashed. She had no idea what he was thinking. But then, he did something that made her stomach drop. He turned toward the diner and started walking. Mia's pulse quickened as she watched Ethan Lawson stride toward the diner. He moved with a quiet intensity, his polished shoes barely making a sound against the pavement. His posture was rigid, his jaw tight, controlled anger radiating from every step. Mia had no idea what he was planning to do, but she knew it wouldn't be good for Randall. A part of her wanted to stop him. Another part wanted to see what would happen. But before Ethan could reach the door, he paused. His shoulders squared, his fingers flexed at his sides, and then slowly, he let out a measured breath and turned back around. Not toward the diner, toward her. Mia blinked, startled. She had expected him to march in there and tear Randall apart. Instead, he was walking back to her. Her fingers unconsciously tightened around Lucky, who stirred slightly, yawning against her chest. Ethan stopped just a few feet away, studying her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he said, "Come work for me." Mia stared. The words didn't make sense. "What?" she stammered. Ethan crouched slightly so he was at eye level with her. His sharp, calculating gaze had softened just a fraction. "You're a good person," he said simply. "We need more of those in my business." Mia let out a breathless laugh. "You don't even know me." Ethan's lips twitched. "I know enough." Mia's heart pounded. Was he serious? This man, this powerful CEO, a man whose name was attached to some of the most successful restaurants in the country, was offering her a job? Just like that? She looked down at herself, her wrinkled apron, her scuffed sneakers, the puppy curled up in her lap. She was just a small-town waitress who had lost everything less than an hour ago. This couldn't be real. Could it? Ethan's gaze flickered down to Lucky, then back to her. "You didn't have to help him," he said. "But you did." Mia swallowed. It was just food. No. His voice was firm. It was kindness. He studied her for a beat longer before exhaling. I don't hire people based on resumes, Mia. I hire based on who they are, and you? His eyes held something genuine. You're exactly the kind of person I want on my team. Mia's chest tightened. She had been invisible for so long, just another struggling worker, unnoticed, unimportant. But now, Ethan Lawson, one of the most powerful men in the industry, had noticed her, and he was offering her something she never thought she'd get. A real chance. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek business card. He held it out to her. This is my direct number, he said. I want you to call me tomorrow. Mia hesitated before taking the card. It felt too nice in her fingers, heavy, embossed, professional. A far cry from the grease-stained order, slips she had spent years scribbling on. I have a position open at one of my restaurants, Ethan continued. Front of house staff, full-time, salary, benefits, health insurance. Mia's breath hitched. That was more than she had ever been offered in her life. She had worked 10-hour shifts at Randall's for barely enough to survive. No benefits, no security, just exhaustion, and now in the span of minutes she was being offered everything she had ever wanted. It was too much. It was too good to be true. She shook her head slowly. I don't understand. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this? Ethan exhaled, leaning slightly against the diner's brick wall. Because I know what it's like to be underestimated, he said. To be treated like you don't matter. Mia's breath caught. He understood. Ethan straightened, slipping his hands into his pockets. And because, he added, I don't believe in letting good people struggle when I can do something about it. Mia's eyes burned. She had spent so long fighting alone, so long pushing through, surviving, scraping by, and now, for the first time, someone was offering to help. But help came with risks. Mia chewed her lip. I don't know anything about fine dining, Ethan shrugged. You'll learn. I don't have any formal training. I'll train you. Mia's mind raced. What if I mess up? What if I'm not good enough? Ethan smiled, just slightly. I don't hire people unless I believe in them. His eyes met hers, unwavering. And I believe in you. Mia swallowed hard. Her hands tightened around Lucky as she tried to process everything. She wanted to say yes. God, she wanted to. But part of her was still terrified. Could she do this? Did she deserve this? Ethan seemed to sense her hesitation. His voice softened. You don't have to decide right now. Mia blinked up at him. Think about it, he said. Sleep on it. But if you want this chance... He tapped the card still resting in her palm. Call me. Mia stared at the card. This wasn't just a job offer. This was a lifeline. For the first time in a long time, she saw something other than survival. Ahead of her, she saw a future. She glanced back up at Ethan, still half convinced she was dreaming. You really mean it? She asked quietly. Ethan's smile was small but certain. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Mia let out a shaky breath. She still didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, for the first time in forever, she had hope. The night, air hung heavy with the weight of missed chances and unexpected opportunities. Mia still sat on the curb, Ethan Lawson's business card pressed between her fingers, her mind reeling from what had just happened. He had offered her a job. A real job, with benefits, stability, and a future. It felt like a dream, too good to be true. And yet the card in her hands was solid, real. Lucky let out a small yawn in her lap, stretching before curling back up. Completely unaware that his presence had just changed her life. And just as Mia was beginning to let the possibility of a new future settle in, the diner door slammed open. Mr. Randall overhears. Randall stormed outside, his face flushed red, his scowl deeper than usual. He had been watching, listening. and it was clear he didn't like what he heard. The sight of Ethan Lawson, a man with power, status, and influence, standing there, offering Mia a job right in front of his diner, had rattled him. Randall was a lot of things. Cheap, heartless, and as stubborn as a rusted nail, but he wasn't stupid. And right now he saw the writing on the wall. Mia Carter, the waitress he had fired without a second thought, was about to walk away with an opportunity far better than anything he had ever given her, and he couldn't let that happen, not without trying to fix his mistake. Desperate to backpedal, Randall cleared his throat loudly, trying to regain some control of the situation. "Mia," he barked, his voice strained, but forced into something that almost sounded polite. "We need to talk." Mia looked up, brows furrowing. She hadn't expected him to follow her outside. Ethan, who had been standing a few feet away, folded his arms, watching Randall with a calm but unreadable expression. Randall ignored him. He took a step closer, trying to mask his frustration with a stiff smile. "I might have been a little harsh earlier." Mia blinked. Did he just... Was that an attempt at an apology? Randall kept going. "You were always a good worker, Mia. One of my best, actually." Ethan let out a quiet huff of amusement, but Mia barely noticed. She just stared at Randall, trying to process what was happening. Was he trying to rehire her? Randall must have seen the confusion on her face because he nodded as if reassuring himself. "That's right," he said quickly. "I was thinking it over and maybe I acted too fast." Ethan scoffed under his breath. Randall's eye twitched, but he ignored him, focusing on Mia. "How about you come back?" Randall said, his voice almost eager. "I could even..." He hesitated as if the words physically pained him. "Give you a little raise, few extra cents an hour." Mia almost laughed. A few cents? She had spent years working for him. Never once had he offered her a raise. Never once had he appreciated her hard work. And now, the second someone else saw her value, Randall was suddenly willing to negotiate. She should have been angry. She should have felt bitter, resentful, but she didn't. Because for the first time in years, she saw exactly what she was worth, and it was a hell of a lot more than a few extra cents. Mia's decision. Mia exhaled, shaking her head. "Randall," she said, voice calm but firm. "No." Randall's expression tightened. "No," he repeated, like he couldn't believe he had heard her correctly. Mia stood up, gently adjusting Lucky in her arms. "I'm not coming back." Randall's face darkened. "Mia, don't be stupid." "I'm not," she interrupted, her voice steady. "For the first time, I'm not." Randall opened his mouth, but Mia wasn't done. "I worked for you for years. I showed up on time, I stayed late, I covered shifts when other people called out. I did everything you asked, and you never, not once, appreciated it." Randall's jaw tensed. Mia took a breath, steadying herself. "I used to think I wasn't good enough for anything better than this job," she admitted. "But the truth is, you weren't good enough for me." Randall's eyes widened. Mia felt lighter. She had spent so long thinking she had no other options, that she had to settle for whatever she could get. But she didn't. She never did. And now she was finally free. She took one final look at the diner she had spent years trapped in. Then, with zero regret, she turned back to Ethan. "Let's go." Ethan smiled, a real approving smile. Good choice. Randall's realization. Randall stood frozen, watching in disbelief as Mia turned her back on him. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't begging for her job back. She was leaving him behind. And not just that, she was stepping into something better. Ethan. Lawson opened the car door for her as if it was the most natural thing in the world. And Mia? She slid into the passenger seat, Lucky curled in her lap, safe and sound. Ethan walked around to the driver's side, casting Randall one last glance. A look that wasn't smug, but wasn't sympathetic either. Just knowing. Because both of them knew exactly what had just happened. Randall had lost, not just an employee, but someone who had given everything to his business. Someone who had deserved more. And he had only realized it when it was too late. The car engine purred to life. Mia didn't look back. As Ethan pulled onto the road, driving her toward a future she never saw coming, Randall was left standing alone, in the cold. For the first time, he regretted underestimating Mia Carter, but regret meant nothing when you were the one who pushed someone away. And Randall knew it. The city skyline shimmered in the evening light, golden hues reflecting off towering glass buildings. The streets bustled with movement, cars weaving through traffic, people walking with purpose, the scent of fresh bread and roasted coffee wafting from high-end bakeries. It was a world Mia had never been part of. But now she belonged. A month had passed since that night outside Randall's diner. A month since she had walked away from the life she thought she was trapped in. And now, she was here, standing in the pristine, polished kitchen of Ember and Sage, one of Ethan Lawson's most successful restaurants. She had never seen anything like it. The kitchen was a masterpiece of efficiency and beauty. Gleaming stainless steel counters stretched across the room, bright under the warm, ambient lighting. The scent of herbs, garlic, and sizzling butter filled the air as chefs worked with artistic precision. It was nothing like Randall's. Here, people didn't drag themselves through shifts beaten down by exhaustion. They moved with purpose, with energy, with passion. The servers carried themselves with confidence, their uniforms crisp, their heads high. Mia had spent the first few days feeling like an outsider, terrified she wouldn't measure up. But Ethan had been right. She could learn. And she did. She trained harder than she ever had before, absorbing everything like a sponge. She studied the menu until she could recite it in her sleep. She learned how to carry 3 plates at once without spilling, how to read a customer's needs before they even spoke. And for the first time in her life, she was appreciated. Mia, Table 14 requested you specifically, one of the managers, Olivia, told her as she passed by. Mia blinked. Wait, really? Olivia smirked. You've got a way with customers, they like you. Mia felt a warmth spread in her chest, an unfamiliar but welcome feeling. People saw her now, not as a replaceable waitress, not as someone struggling to get by. They saw her, and that changed everything. After her shift, Mia stepped outside into the cool evening air, the sounds of the city buzzing around her. She was still adjusting to it, the sheer size of everything, the constant movement. But tonight she wasn't overwhelmed. Tonight she was heading somewhere familiar. She hailed a cab and gave the driver an address, one she knew by heart now. 20 minutes later, she was standing outside Ethan's townhouse. The door hadn't even fully opened before Lucky bolted toward her. Mia, Ethan called as the little pup launched himself at her, his tiny paws pressing against her legs. She laughed, kneeling to scoop him up. Hey, buddy. Lucky wriggled excitedly in her arms, his tail wagging furiously. He had gained weight over the past few weeks, his coat shinier, his eyes brighter. He was healthy now, happy. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a knowing look on his face. You know, if I didn't know any better, I'd think he loves you more than me. Mia grinned. Maybe he just has good taste. Ethan chuckled, stepping aside to let her in. She had been visiting almost every night since starting her job. At first, she had come just to check on Lucky, but over time it had turned into dinners with Ethan, conversations that lasted until midnight, laughter that felt effortless. Ethan had insisted she didn't have to, that Lucky would always have a home with him. But every time she left, it felt wrong, because deep down Lucky was hers, and eventually Ethan had realized it too. One evening, over a glass of wine at Ethan's sleek, modern dining table, he had said it so casually that Mia almost didn't process it. You should keep him. She had nearly choked on her drink. What? Ethan had smirked. You heard me. Mia had stared. But he's your dog. Ethan had shrugged. Was my dog. He glanced down at Lucky, who had been curled up in Mia's lap. But it's pretty clear who he belongs to now. Mia had looked at the tiny pup. his trusting eyes, his wagging tail. She had saved him, but somehow in the process he had saved her too. That night she had taken Lucky home. And for the first time in a long time, her apartment, the same place she had once been terrified of losing, felt like a home. The days passed in a blur of progress. Mia was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. She had gone from a waitress barely scraping by to someone who walked with purpose. Her confidence grew with every shift. With every night she nailed a service, made a customer's night, impressed her managers. Ethan checked in on her constantly, though he didn't hover. "You're killing it," he told her one evening, leaning against the bar as she finished. "Up paperwork," Mia smirked. "I have a good teacher." Ethan tilted his head. "I didn't do anything, this was all you." Mia wanted to argue, to tell him that his belief in her had changed everything. But maybe that was the point. She wasn't just here because of Ethan Lawson. She was here because of who she was. And for the first time, she believed that. One evening, after closing, Mia stood outside the restaurant, staring up at the city skyline. It had been 1 month since she lost her job at Randall's. 1 month since she thought she had hit rock bottom. And now, she had everything she had ever wanted. Not just a job, not just stability, but self-worth. She pulled Ethan's business card from her pocket, the same one he had given her that night. It was creased now, worn at the edges. She had held on to it even after she had accepted the job. Not because she needed it anymore, but because it reminded her of something important. The moment her life had changed. She tucked the card back into her pocket, smiling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. And for the first time in forever, she was ready. The sun had barely risen over the city when Mia stepped into Ember and Sage, her usual routine beginning before the first customers arrived. The restaurant was quiet at this hour, the warm glow of the pendant lights reflecting off the sleek wooden floors. The kitchen staff was already at work, the soft hum of conversation mixing with the rhythmic sound of knives against cutting boards. The scent of fresh-baked bread and brewing coffee drifted through the air. Mia breathed it all in. She had grown to love these early mornings, the quiet before the rush, the anticipation of another busy shift. And as she tied on her apron, she realized something. She was happy. For the first time in years, she didn't dread going to work. She didn't spend her nights counting tips and worrying if she had enough to survive another month. She wasn't just getting by anymore. She was building something. And all of it had started with the night she thought her life had fallen apart. Losing. Her job at Randall's Diner had been the best thing that ever happened to her. She just hadn't known it at the time. She had walked away from that place with nothing. No job, no security, no idea what was next. But she had walked away with her dignity, and somehow that had been enough. Because without that moment, without that choice to believe she deserved better, she never would have found this. This job. This new life. This version of herself that she never thought existed. She glanced down at Lucky, who was curled up in his usual spot near the back office, his small body rising and falling in peaceful sleep. He was safe, loved, cared for, just like she was. Mia smiled softly. That night outside Randall's hadn't been the end of her story. It had been the beginning. Mia adjusted her apron and headed toward the front of the restaurant where the other servers were gathering for the morning briefing. One of them, Ellie, a new hire barely out of high school, was struggling to balance a tray of glasses. She was nervous, hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady herself. Mia recognized the look. It was the same one she had worn when she first started in this industry. Stepping forward, she gently placed a hand on Ellie's wrist. "Here," she said, offering a reassuring smile. "Try shifting your grip a little, like this." Ellie hesitated, then followed Mia's lead. The tray steadied, her shoulders relaxed. Mia grinned. "See? You've got it." Ellie let out a relieved breath, her lips curling into a small, grateful smile. "Thanks, Mia." "Anytime," Mia said. She meant it, because she knew what it felt like to be struggling, to feel like you were barely keeping up. And if she could make things even a little easier for the people coming up behind her, then she was exactly where she was meant to be. Later that evening, as the last wave of customers finished their meals and the restaurant settled into its quiet post-dinner hum, Ethan found her at the bar, scanning through the night's receipts. "You're doing well," he said, sliding onto the stool next to her. Mia glanced up. "Thanks." Ethan studied her for a moment, then smirked. "You know, when I offered you the job, I had a feeling you'd be great." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Just a feeling?" He chuckled. "All right, maybe I knew." Mia rolled her eyes, but there was warmth in her smile. Ethan's expression turned more serious. "You've become a leader here, Mia. People respect you. They listen to you." Mia's breath hitched slightly. She had never thought of herself as a leader. She had spent so much of her life just trying to survive. She had never stopped to imagine that she could be someone others looked up to. Ethan leaned back against the bar, arms crossed. "Which is why I think it's time for something more." Mia blinked. "More?" Ethan's smirk returned. "I want to start training you for a managerial position." Mia stared at him. She was sure she had misheard. "What?" Ethan's gaze was steady. "I think you're ready. You've got the skills, the work ethic, and more importantly, you care about people. That's what makes a great leader." Mia's heart pounded. A manager? Her? She had spent years being treated as disposable, as someone easily replaced, and now, the CEO of one of the most successful restaurant groups in the country was telling her she was worth investing in. For a long moment, she couldn't find the words. Then she exhaled, a slow, steady breath. A month ago, she might have said no. She might have let the fear win. But she wasn't that girl anymore. A slow, determined smile spread across her lips. "When do we start?" Ethan grinned. "Tomorrow." That night, as Mia walked home, Lucky trotting beside her, she let the moment sink in. She had been a struggling waitress, a girl who thought she would never be anything more, but she had been wrong. She had fought for herself. She had taken a risk. And now, she was building something. A career, a life, a future. She had no idea what was coming next. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready. The small town hadn't changed. Much Mia Carter hadn't been back in months, but as she walked down Main Street, everything was exactly as she remembered it. The brick storefronts, the rusty old gas station sign, the flickering streetlights that had never quite worked right. Yet, even though the town remained the same, she wasn't. She had come so far from the girl who once stood outside Randall's diner with nothing but a stray puppy and the weight of uncertainty crushing her chest. Now she had a future, a real career, people who valued her, a life that wasn't just about survival. She didn't come back to relive the past. She came to bury it. Lucky trotted beside her, his small paws clicking against the pavement. He was healthy now, no longer the sickly, starved pup she had found outside the diner. He was full of life, his coat gleaming in the afternoon sun, his tail wagging as he sniffed the air. Mia reached down, scratching behind his ears. "I don't know why I'm nervous," she muttered. Lucky sneezed in response. She huffed a quiet laugh. "Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter anymore, does it? Still?" She felt her pulse quicken as she approached the diner. The same neon sign flickered above the door, buzzing like a tired wasp. The same cracked sidewalk led up to the entrance, but something about the place felt different. It wasn't just her perception. It was Randall's diner itself. It looked empty. The parking lot, once filled with regulars, had only 2 cars. Through the front window, she could see half-empty booths, a single waitress dragging her feet between tables, and Randall himself, hunched behind the counter, his face hardened with frustration. Mia hesitated for only a second. Then, with a steady breath, she pushed open the door. The familiar chime of the doorbell rang through the quiet diner. No one looked up, not like they used to. When Mia had worked here, there had always been a certain energy to the place. Even on bad days, customers still shuffled in and out, coffee cups clinking, the murmur of conversation filling the air. But now, it felt dead. She stepped inside, scanning the diner with fresh eyes. There was a sticky spill on the counter that hadn't been cleaned. The booths were worn out, the upholstery cracked. The air carried the faint scent of burnt grease, like someone had left food on the grill too long. The waitress, a girl who looked no older than 18, moved sluggishly from table to table. She had the same tired look Mia had once worn, the same slumped shoulders, the same exhausted expression. Mia knew that feeling, she had lived it, and now, she would never feel it again. Randall stood behind the register, muttering under his breath. His uniform shirt was wrinkled, his hair grayer than she remembered. When he finally looked up and saw her, his eyes narrowed. "Mia," he said, his voice stiff. "Didn't expect to see you back here." Mia didn't miss the slight tension in his expression. He knew. He knew she had left for something better. That she had walked away from his control. And from the look of his failing business, he also knew he had made a mistake. Before Mia could respond, a familiar voice called out, "Mia?" She turned to see Cassie, the waitress who had worked alongside her for years. Mia's face lit up. "Cassie!" The two women hugged tightly, and Mia could instantly feel the difference. Cassie wasn't the same either. She looked happier, more confident. "You came back?" Cassie asked, grinning. "Just passing through," Mia said, glancing around. "But things seem different," Cassie scoffed. "That's one way to put it." She lowered her voice. "Business has been tanking. Ever since you left, it's been nothing but bad reviews and people quitting." Mia raised a brow. "People quit?" Cassie nodded. "A lot of them. After you got fired, some of the regulars started complaining about how Randall treated the staff. Then the new hires. Well, they didn't stick around. The turnover's been a mess." Mia glanced toward the counter where Randall's scowl had deepened. He was listening, and from the look in his eyes, he hated every word. Cassie smiled, nudging Mia's arm. "I left too, by the way." Mia's eyes widened. "You did?" Cassie nodded proudly. "After you got fired, I started thinking, if you could find something better, why couldn't I? So I quit. Got a job at this little cafe in the next town over. Better hours, better pay, and the manager actually treats people like human beings." Mia felt something warm and deep settle in her chest. She hadn't realized how much her actions had impacted the people around her. She had left to save herself, but in doing so, she had inspired others to leave too. Cassie touched her arm gently. "I just wanted to say thank you. I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't seen you stand up for yourself." Mia swallowed hard, emotions threatening to surface. This was what mattered. She hadn't just changed her own life. She had helped someone else believe they deserved better too. Bitter voice cut through the moment. "This is ridiculous." Mia and Cassie turned toward the counter where Randall stood, arms crossed, glowering at them. "You think you made some big difference, huh?" He sneered, looking at Mia. "The place was fine before you left, and it's fine now." Mia tilted, her head. "Really?" She gestured around the diner, at the empty booths, at the lack of customers, at the single overworked waitress. Randall's jaw tightened. Mia smiled slightly. "Looks to me like it's falling apart." Randall's face reddened. "Don't act like you're better than this place." Mia held his gaze. "I'm not better than this place," she said simply. "But I am better than how you treated me." Silence hung between them. Randall knew she was right, but he would never admit it. Mia didn't need him to. She had already won. She turned back to Cassie, squeezing her hand one last time. "I'm really proud of you." Cassie grinned. "You, too." Then, without another glance at Randall, Mia headed for the door. She had no reason to stay. Her life was out there, waiting, and this was just a chapter she had already finished. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, the sun was beginning to set, casting golden light over the street. Lucky wagged his tail beside her, trotting happily, as if sensing that they had just closed a door neither of them would ever need to walk through again. Mia didn't look back. She didn't need to, because she wasn't just walking away from a diner. She was walking toward her future, and for the first time in her entire life, she knew she had made the right choice.